Thank you so much, Ritu, and always a pleasure to see Raiji. And he's had a stellar career with an amazing experience. He's got amazing in-depth experience into policing in the state of Punjab. He's kind of had various other tenures where he's had in-depth experience of policing. Raiji, without as Ritu was also saying, I would like to ask you to give us an example of some amazing kind of experience that you had, which relates with the topic that we are talking about today. We will go to a few other dimensions also. Policing with care and compassion.
It's a pleasure to see you.
To be able to make a difference. Yes.
It's a pleasure.
So if you can give me an example of an experience that you have had in policing.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to see you, Jyoti, and I'm logging in right now from Kolkata, where I am on election duty, and we have a long association going back to 2003-4. I remember as the anchor was introducing you, we have a long association, and it's always a pleasure to see you.
Likewise.
So kind. Jyoti, the concept, as we were discussing this concept, I see that I was just listening to the discussion before this, and it was about the use of technology and bringing about change in the system. And one of the great takeaway points from the previous discussion was how everything has to be anchored in the fact that all these things are dealing with the human beings, and more so with the respect to police as such. So while we may be caught up in this concept of bringing about change, but one essential thing which has always been with me in the police is that we are here dealing with human beings, and the human beings are not something which is fixed in stone. Human beings are always reactive to the kind of behavior you deal with them. So they are also susceptible, or one should say that they respond to your behavior towards them. And there have been many instances where I have had people confessing to the crimes simply on basis of my behavior with them. If you need to, I think the policing today requires this ability to be on the same page with the other person. How do you connect with the other person? Technology may give you that superficial connection, but the actual connection, the real change, the real paradigm shift or the game changer occurs only if you are able to connect with another human being as a human being, feel his pain or his concerns. And the best example I would recall, again, that is probably the time when we met with each other. You were with the CNN, IBN at that time, I think. This was during my tenure in Patiala, when there was this important killing of a judge in Patiala. He was killed in the close vicinity of CM's residence, and he was quite an important personality of Patiala as such, and his killing did create a lot of scare, and it was even during the terrorism, Punjab had not suffered killing of judicial officers, and here, after the closure of terrorism, there was this judge killed up, and there were various theories which were purported as to who could have done this, why this judge was killed, coming from a good family, and it was there that when we started examining the whole scenario and we got into conversation. Here, the word would be conversation, I would say. Police terminology generally says that we got into interrogation, we got into questioning. These are not the terms which make me feel comfortable, because these are the terms where you are putting the other person on a lower pedestal and then trying to extract information. So any extraction of information is in a scenario where the other person is feeling slighted, or so that was the time when I got to try out my ideas. And in policing, I think the kind of police setup we have, it is only as a SSP that you get an opportunity to show your real worth, to try out. So when we started a conversation with the people around him, we could clear the puzzle, we could fit in the things, and that was a learning lesson to me. That was beginning of my district tenures, and the similar kind of policy I kept going. And then intelligence bureau was a great learning experience. I think every policeman should do a tenure, at least the IPS officers who are at a senior level, they should do a tenure in intelligence bureau. Our own Wadi DGP Punjab has had a long tenure in intelligence bureau. It suddenly opens up your mind to new things in policing, and the policing culture as such doesn't open up. It doesn't promote this kind of opening up. It's a long-winded answer I have given you, but maybe we can start off from here and then continue with this conversation.
Absolutely. In fact, Raji, this is a very interesting example that you gave, and you also spoke about compassion and how you actually dealt with people in a conversational manner instead of an interrogational manner. But often they say that the police also has a lot of deterrent effect because of the fact that people perceive the police to be a tough organization. People perceive the police to actually have force available to them. People are scared of the police. People know that police can deploy so many things against them. Is that deterrent factor more important in a country like India where there is automatic deterrence? Whereas if you kind of go into care and compassion, would people perceive the police to be a weak force and maybe take it for a ride and try to ride roughshod over various things in terms of protest? How do you balance this care and compassion with the deterrent effect of the police, which should be there in a complex and a large country like India?
Very rightly put, and this is here where the IPS leadership has to kick in. See, the policing problems are varied problems. There may be a problem at the ground level which would require a lot of deterrence and may call for the use of force. It is there that we need people down below us who come from a similar strata. See, at the ground level, when you are dealing with a criminal or a psychopath, you need a person who can think like that person. It is not, if you start treating a psychopath at your own level, you will be in for a major problem. You can end up in a major problem because your thinking may not go down to that level, that low level of thinking which a criminal may have. So here, what I would suggest is that it is not this or that we have to go in for. It is always we have to assess a situation according to the options available to us. What are the options available to us? Is it right if I should kick in, or I should allow the person below me to sort out the problem? And this again, Jyoti, I think what we require in a police is a change in the style of leadership also. Generally, there is that temptation in the police to kick in at the first go, to be the first one to be the responder. Even at a senior level, I have seen people would like to uh, uh, glow in that limelight which comes in with you kicking in, and suddenly all the arc lights are on you and you are responding to the queries. It is best to make a good leader in the police force would stand in the background. He would allow the people down below, and it has to be a measured kind of a response. You have to see where you need to assert the authority. You have to see where you have to have a conciliation kind of a policy where you have to have a conversation with the people. So it has to be a mix of various things. And I think one reason there is not much clarity in the public also with respect to which problem requires which level of officer to sort out. And in the police also, this is a problem. People get into problems because they want that hero kind of that Singham kind of a culture which you see in the movies. People also appreciate, and then you get that timely limelight into yourself, and it becomes a sort of an addiction, like you want to play to the gallery then. So I think it is always better to have a proper assessment, a brainstorming about the situation, and see to it which person would be a better associated to sort out that problem, and avoid rushing into a. Yeah, sorry.
No, I was waiting for you to continue, but several interesting points came out from what you said. You were talking about the fact that it depends a lot on the leadership, and the Indian police service especially has to play a very important role there. But I mean, if one really looks at policing, it's one of the toughest jobs possible, because on the one hand, you're expected to deliver care and compassion, but who are you expected to mostly engage with? You're engaging with criminals, you're engaging with riffraff, you're engaging with gangsters, you're engaging with law and order situations. Police comes into effect where there is something that is negative that is happening, and yet there is a huge expectation of positivity from the police handling that negativity. Do you see that putting a lot of pressure on police in terms of how they handle the negativity with positivity, and the kind of stress and strain that it puts on policing, while the Indian police service, because of their maturity and leadership, will be able to handle it? How does it move down the ranks? How are you able to handle all of this?
Look, very, very interesting question you have raised, and this question has always intrigued me also at a personal level. You see, what all this calls for is a sort of emotional clarity within a person's own self. You should be clear about your own priorities and your own aims and your own self. Where would you kick into a problem? Who would be the best person? My definition of a leader is a person who can make leaders out of others. He is not the person who would like to emerge as a leader of a situation, but he would try and identify the potentialities of people under him. And that is the way I have, when you were asking me about the authority and this thing, that's the manner in which I have operated. I'll give you a more recent example. I was posted as IGP Patiala, and there was this farmers agitation in Patiala, and farmers had given a call for surrounding Patiala, and then cutting off supplies to Patiala. So we got into negotiations with them. We had a conversation with them. We succeeded in having them camp outside on the outskirts of Patiala in a mandi area. And we, I come from a farming community. I come from this place. I understood the concerns they had. I myself went over and saw to it that they were comfortably placed there. I went and met them also. But at the same time, we did not lower our guard. We did not say that, okay, you come into Patiala and create a rampage here. So this is, we are in a changing India. We are not in a imperial or a colonial country. We are a police which is answerable to the people. And when you have a police which is answerable to the people, then the police has to be intelligent police. It cannot be simply that you have a single solution for every problem. And this is where the leadership is required, that the leadership clearly defines out the roles which the person at the ground level has to do, person at the middle level has to do, person at the top management has to do. So this is, I think, where we need to define our roles. That definition of roles has not taken place in police. Therefore, sometimes a small problem which can be sorted out, it becomes aggravated and or sometimes generally in Punjab, I have seen that police also because of its background of terrorism overreacts to a situation, and that overreaction creates its own problems. So that kind of what we require, I think, is more of a thinking, and also at a certain level, I also feel that, see, there are two kinds of authority. One is your institutional authority, which just by manning a chair, you get that authority. Second is your personality. And since you are dealing with the human beings, your personality is going to make a lot of difference. While the institution gives you an authority, but how you manage that authority, and also when in times like these, when there is a lot of pressure and the institutional authority is slowly and slowly giving way. See, these institutions are British legacy, and these institutions, the validity of these institutions is going to be questioned in times to come, because they are not in sync with the democratic principle, and they are not in sync with the mass information culture which has taken place in a country. Like right now, so much is the flow of information that each and every order would be questioned, because the information set on which you are banking your decision is also available in the open spaces. So you have to have that kind of personality difference where people can and people do recognize your authority, not just on the basis of your institutional, but on basis of your personality also.
Again, Raji, you made a very important point. You spoke about the fact that this is no longer an imperial force. This is no longer a colonial force. It is answerable to the people. But how the policing system has been structured in India is that it is under the direct command of the executive. And since it is under the command of the executive, which is again the legislation that is there above them, do you find that there is a certain amount of lack of independence that is brought in because of the fact that there is this whole legislative system which is above the executive, and that causes any kind of hindrance in the police being able to independently deliver on this role of compassionate policing for society where they are directly answerable? Does this loop work, or should it be more direct? How have you kind of seen this all through your tenure?
Very, very relevant question. Very, very relevant question. And Jyoti, this question has been agitating my mind also. In 2011, when I was working with the Intelligence Bureau, I went to Cambridge University, and there we were exposed to the international police practices. And most interestingly, now this is something of which, like, the British have a county system. They have 43 counties, and each county, they have a chief constable. They had a chief constable, but when we went there in 2011, interestingly, what they did was that the post of chief constable was made a electable post. It was a post to which anybody could put in his hat, and then there would be elections in that county, and it need not be somebody who has got into the IPS or who's joined as a constable will become a chief constable. So what has happened there is that democracy has seeped in, and democracy has matured to a level where they are willing to entrust the post of the chief constable, what would be equivalent to a DGP in Punjab, to a elected person. So, but I also believe that maybe here, because our society is different, we are not still ready for this kind of a system. But that does not mean that the police has to work directly under the executive, or police has to go to the executive. What it means is that the executive, if I may use the term executive as a wider term, executive would imply the politicians also. And what it means is that they bring in their own perspective to the situation. They are the people who are actually connected with the grassroots to a level which is more than how we are connected with. We come from a different category. They come from the grassroots level. We come from a different stream. And they do bring in that grassroots perspective, while we come from a formal training in these institutions. We can, it has to be a happy mix of two as such. We take in their perspective, they listen to our perspective, and it's always through this exchange of ideas that we can arrive at that golden mean, which may be best for the public as such. But I do see that 2011 visit was quite enlightening for me, and in times to come, I do feel that there would be, with the technology now available, everything being out in open, the kind of open society which is being created. So everything would become more and more visible to the public as such, and public would start questioning these things, and they would start questioning the certain amount of opaque nature which is presently there. They would, and that's how the institutions become accountable also. Like for
In fact,
instance,
very ironical, you were talking about your visit to Cambridge and your exposure to the county system there and how the policing system has evolved in the UK. And ironical that we also kind of have a legacy of the British system. And in fact, the Fraser Commission, when it was appointed long back at the beginning of the last century, again, it had also come out with the findings that there is too much politicization of the police during the British Raj itself, and said that the people are losing faith in the police and we have to kind of bring in some sort of reforms. After that, we have had several rounds of trying to kind of reform the policing system in India, the Shah Commission, various other kind of commissions which have sat and tried to figure out some sort of a reform process that would be there. In fact, my last question to you would be, because I think we running out of time shortly, so I would like to kind of take your inputs on that. What is the way forward? What do you think can be done to kind of further increase the connect of the police with the people? Ultimately, that is where the entire service delivery of the police is focused and geared towards. What are the things that can be done, and what are the challenges that you foresee?
Again, a very interesting question. And see how the history moves, how the time moves, that is independent of what you or I may want. But when I look at the things, the way things are moving, the way media explosion is there, information explosion is there. So in times to come, I expect that policing would become more open to the people. That is for one. Other than that, at institutional level also, Jyoti, interestingly, we are going to go in for major recruitment process in Punjab Police now, and I'm associated with that process. And Awadhi DGP Dinkar Gupta ji, he is a visionary of a sort, having worked in intelligence bureau. So what he is doing with the respect to recruitment is something unique. Again, we are trying to get the right kind of a people for the right kind of a job. So we are, instead of going in for a usual person, we are going to get in people who are attuned with technology, people who are attuned with law, people who are attuned with forensics. So when you change the culture of an institution, that institution also starts opening up. So there would be uh, two things happening simultaneously. While there would be pressure from the society to police, on police to open up and to be more accessible and to be more professional in their job, The police itself is also changing. This recruitment which we are going in for now, in times to come, if you have good people, like who are the people who like to hide behind the authority? People who are not confident of themselves, who do not have the knowledge of a subject, they are the ones who generally like to hide behind a shield and be that faceless kind of a creature. But a person who knows his job, who knows what is required of him, he would be willing to answer back to the people. He would be willing to share with the people that these are the issues, this is how we are trying to sort out. And once that sharing of information between the police and the public starts, naturally a trust would be created. If you are willing to answer queries of a one person, if a word of mouth goes that, okay, here is a well-meaning person. So generally, so both sides, I think in the times to come, there would be greater bridging of this gap. And I am an optimist by temperament, and I see great future for Indian police and Punjab police as such.
Thank you so much, Raji. As you said, that if you know your job, it shows through, and it clearly shows through that you have wide-ranging kind of experience of policing. And we look forward to your coming back from Kolkata, and looking forward to having a cup of coffee with you once you're back to further carry on this conversation.
It will be my pleasure. Have a wonderful day ahead. Have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you so much, Raji. And then back to the master of ceremonies, Ritu.